How's it going, everyone? It's your boy Dak908, aka the Dig Dug himself, and Robofiends, it's time. I don't know what else to say. I mean, Armored Core 6 Fires Rubicon is an amazing game. It's finally here. We've been waiting on this game for absolutely forever, and I'm just so glad everyone is getting a chance to play it. And so many new AC pilots, Ravens, whatever you want to call yourselves, are actually out here playing the game. Because Armored Core was always a very niche game. Now, maybe not so much. Maybe it could become a little bit more mainstream, which some people may frown on, but the point is that's not here. What is here is this game and what I want to tell you guys. Today I want to teach you all, or give you an idea, some guidelines if you will, on how to make a pretty basic AC. Now this AC is specified for people who's kind of just getting new to the game. I didn't exactly know when I should start making these videos because the way in which you get parts in this game is slightly different than what it used to be. So at least as it stands right now, it's all tied to story progression. I mean, that's kind of how it is, but it's tied to story progression. The multiplayer aspect of the game isn't as heavy-handed as it was back in Verdict Day and Armored Core 5. You could literally not play the campaign at all, and just focus all your effort into multiplayer, and you will get your parts and everything accordingly. Nevertheless, so what this is about. This is an AC, the AC that I've been using, that I've named Ruby Red, and I figured, you know what, this is a pretty solid AC. I like the way it performs. There's a lot of things about it that I think is really good, and I want to share this AC with other people. So this is going to be my basic AC guide, so that way, for those of you just starting out, probably, I think, maybe like 8 missions in, tops. I think the last mission that I did with real significance that I told myself, okay, this is where we're going to end it, is, as far as the parts go, is right before you get Juggernaut, well, right before you fight the quote-unquote Juggernaut. It's a mission where you have to, like, climb a wall and do a thing. If you've not seen it yet, then you should be okay, but if you have seen it, just a little bit past that, this still applies to you. Now, for those who are actually beating the game or whatever, I will have videos for you guys soon, but as it stands right now, I want to get some of the newer stuff, the newer people taken care of. But for the most part, up until that point, you can kind of use whatever you have, and you can essentially get things done. Nothing was very difficult up until then. It isn't until now where things get a little bit dicey. But with that said, all the introduction out the way, let's dive right into it. So first things first, as I always do, even back in the day, we always start with the legs, because the whole point of the legs in Armored Core is to basically hold up the rest of your AC. And in this one, it's still, the case. So I'm using the VP422 bipedal legs. Now this is an incredibly good part. Like, now I'm not even entirely sure if you can get it right before Juggernaut, but I know I just beat Juggernaut. I think it did one other mission outside of that, but I know it's totally a thing that you guys could get relatively early on. Nevertheless, so these legs here, they're great. Like I said before, they have amazing stats. Basically all across the board. So if we look at the AP, it has a relatively decent amount of AP. You're going to get the majority of your AP from your legs and your core. This has a huge chunk of AP, so this is going to be great for people who tend to block with their face, so that's kind of cool. Your defenses, your kinetic defenses, your energy and explosive defenses, they're pretty solid, roughly around the 300.5-ish mark, which is really decent. It will go up and down depending on the rest of your build, but if you look to the far right, our defenses, the kinetic and energy and explosive defenses, are just about a little over 1,000 apiece. So I kind of feel like there's a very balanced build, so that way you guys can get hit with basically anything and not take serious amounts of damage from multiple regards. The only thing I kind of want to look at, maybe do a little bit more on, this is a personal thing, is the explosive damage, because the explosive defense is going to be all your missiles, well, the enemy missiles and stuff, which are more common than that of like energy and such. But that's not. I mean, I don't have enough materials, enough resources with me right now to actually make that make a difference. But nevertheless, see, the load limit of a AC is completely dependent on the legs, because how strong the legs are will depend on how much your load limit is, and your load limit determines all the parts you can put on the AC. So this goes with your arms, your cores, your heads, all your weapons, everything. They all have to fit within that load limit. Now there's something else that we also have as well, that is the EN limit, but we're going to get to that when we talk about the generator. But one thing we need to know about your load limit is that you don't want to get right at the maximum of your load limit, because then it degrades the performances of like basically everything else. It means you're slower because you're so heavy. Like, just because you can load all the stuff on you doesn't mean you should. You know what I mean? So just keep that in the back of your head. These legs are very solid. Another set of legs I was also going to use was Melander. Now Melander, well, first of all, let's get something out the way. If you pre-order the game, you got this. LG012 Melander C3. All of your parts going to be annotated with C3. That full set is amazing. You can run that for a great amount of time, but I try not using it too much because I knew how good it was and not everyone pre-ordered the game. Some people probably get in the game later. So if you do have these parts, use those, but for the most part we're going to use these. But I am going to compare them to this, so to the legs we're using currently. So as you can see right now, a lot of the stats are relatively better for the C3, but that's because, you know, it's a pre-order bonus, it's a custom part, it's like a lot of really, like, it's good, it's supposed to be good, it's the people who spent the money. Now, to be fair, a lot of the parts, or a lot of the parameters that are actually better, the blue if you will, isn't better by much, which I can live with, you know what I mean? If it'd be different if it was like way better, but it's not, so it's not the end of the world if you're losing like 20-30 points here and there on a couple of different parts. So that's why I'm comparing the parts that I'm picking to these, to kind of give you guys a taste of what could have been if you don't have. So with that long explanation out the way, we're using these legs because they're very solid, and these are, you know, the litmus test to it, and they kind of pass in that regard. One thing I do like about these more than the Melander C3s is that it has, even though it has less AP, some of the defenses may not be all that good, but the load limit. Load limit, that's what I'm talking about. You get to put bigger and better guns on there. Anyway, moving on. So legs are done, we're gonna go to arms. Now arms, we're running these arms. These are the, I cannot pronounce that arms. I just refer to them as knocked. Whatever. It's just what I colloquially refer to them as. But the point for these arms is one-fold, actually. So there's something very important when it comes to your arms. Your arms dictate how well guns react within your hands, which makes sense because you hold the gun in your hand, right? And this is predicated right in your recoil control, firearm specialization, and target tracking. So these things are basically what arms like are all about. There's certain things what is it? The arm load limit, depending on how heavy the weapons you can carry in your hands, which is totally a thing. It's kind of new actually, but yeah, that's a thing as well. But so long as you're not like being weird about stuff, you should be okay with this. But it's recoil control, fire specialization, and target tracking. These arms in particular have great firearm specialization and target tracking. Now your recoil control is quite low. Honestly, compared to others, is basically like the lowest by a good margin. But here's the problem with this though. Well, the one thing that not necessarily the game won't tell you that you should worry about only. Certain weapons require you to take a firing stance. And in that firing stance, that's when you take your recoil into effect. Like the majority of your recoil into effect. That's when it hurts. So if you're using a weapon that takes a stance, like let's say a bazooka or something like that, that's when the recoil is going to be pretty heavy, so you're going to be standing there for a lot longer, and it'll kind of be a little bit slower. So so long as you stay away from weapons like that, it won't be as big. But there's also something to note that regular weapons also have recoil as well. So long as that recoil is down low, it shouldn't affect it too greatly, which is fine because the weapons that I've chosen are going to be okay for this. However, if you want to not use the weapons I've chosen and you want to use weapons with a bit of recoil and whatnot, I again would recommend Melander, the first one, not the, well, if you have the custom one, sure, but relatively speaking, we're probably gonna have access to this one more so than others because everyone can buy this one. I would prefer this one because it's better than the arms we have chosen in basically every regard except for if you look to the far right, your speed and such, which is what I wanted to actually focus a bit on because he needed speed somewhere. I'd rather sacrifice a bit of defense in my arms but keep my firing real nice and still have my speed. So if I wanted to not use the arms chosen, which are the knocks, I would use these. They're also readily available. You can purchase them quite readily. Now moving over to the core. The core, this is another VP product, VP40S. It's a very solid core. The cool thing about this core is that it has great defenses all around. Again, a hallmark of the VP. But the cool point to it is that it is almost as good as the litmus test one that we were speaking of before. This is the one where, you know, you sacrifice in one hand, sacrifice and give in the other. I wanted this one, the VP, even though Melander is a lot better in a lot of other regards in terms of like speed and such, not by a whole lot, but it's the AP, the core defenses, and the weight. See, the weight is, like we spoke about before, the weight, you don't want the weight to get too high. So I wanted to get a lot of solid defenses, like not just AP as in health, but actual defenses, and also maintain a relatively decent weight when it comes to your core, because your core is usually your heaviest unit on your entire AC. And I want to save a lot of weight because I have a very heavy part that we're putting on that's incredible in my opinion. So to have the higher defenses here and a decent amount of weight, and my EN load not be incredibly outrageous, is honestly what I really wanted to be at. Now, there is a couple other things I probably would have swapped out, but realistically, I think this core is probably one of the better cores. You could also swap for this one as well, another knocked core, but you have to kind of change your build around a little bit, and then you'd be very like speed orientated, which isn't an issue. But as far as like a basic all around build goes, I instead went to go for defenses as opposed to just raw speed. We'll do a speed build later, but the all around nature of this particular part compared to other all around parts, in my opinion, is just better. You know, you save weight, you have great AP and defenses, and it allows you to put on bigger parts like generators and such. Moving over to our head, now this is where we do side with the Melander part, the Melander head. Now the cool thing about heads, something you guys should really note in Armored Core, is your scanning. Now scanning, if you're playing on controller, is down on the D-pad. You should be scanning a lot, almost constantly, relatively speaking. The problem with this one though is that it doesn't have the greatest scan duration. There are like basically every other head. Actually, another head I was using was this one, the knocked head, because the scan duration was so large. But I was mostly doing that when I was first going through a mission, and I wanted to make sure I collected all the, you know, the collectibles, if you will, and I needed the scan to be in effect for a lot longer. But for the most part, if you're in the thick of things and you're fighting and you're keeping your eyes open and straight out to you, the scan duration is going to be a huge issue. But a good thing about it is the scan distance is pretty solid as well, so it actually reaches far out. And that's kind of why I chose this head. As far as AP and stuff goes, it's not like the best, honestly, but it does have that sweet spot of, you know, when it comes to the EN load and the weight and such. So the actual scanning performance of the head itself is decent enough. We had to make some sacrifices in some cases, and I kind of feel this one's a worthwhile sacrifice because I'm not really losing a whole lot. I mean, compared to the other heads, not this one, because remember, this one's a custom one, but compared to the other heads, we're not really losing a whole lot in terms of performance. We have higher defenses and whatnot. The scan distance is pretty solid. The only thing we're really losing on is your scan duration, which is something that I can live with if we can live longer. You know what I mean? So the core AC is done. That's the core AC, okay? Now let's talk about the weapons. This will be a lot quicker because weapons are weapons. So in the beginning, you get this rifle. It's a good weapon. I don't know what else to say about it. The one thing I can say I don't like about it is its magazine capacity. If you look at the very bottom, not the very bottom, I'll show you. The magazine rounds, we're only sitting at 18. Okay, that burns up real quick in a firefight. You'll notice it. You'll be like, man, I kind of wish it was, you know, more. And the reload time is, in my opinion, kind of high. But other than that, it's a very solid weapon. It's a great weapon to put consistent damage on an opponent. Great to just like pepper them down. You have a huge like reserve of ammunition, so this will last your entire mission, if not more so. Usually the last thing that'll run out of ammo is going to be your primary rifle, which is fine because this is your primary weapon. Speaking of primaries and such, your secondary weapon is going to be a laser blade, not the pulse blade. You get the pulse blade first. We're upgrading to the laser blade. Why the laser blade, not the pulse blade? The laser blade is just better. I mean, look at the stats. They're just better. It has higher attack. It has higher impact. It actually can swing twice. Now, here's the thing. I know the pulse blade has consecutive hits. It has 2 consecutive hits, meaning you can slash once and slash again. Whereas the laser blade only has 1 hit. It has 1 hit if you just tap the button. If you hold the button, it does a wide swing. 2 swings, actually. So in my opinion, it's either just as good, if not better. Honestly, I don't know how else to put it. It's just like, if you liked the pulse blade, literally graduate to the laser blade. It's just better, has more damage, greater impact, hits twice. The charge range is insane. I love, like, using this as a means to put my opponent into full stagger, because it does a lot of impact damage. So, like, boom, after you get hit the second swing, they're staggered, fire off some rockets. But speaking of rockets, we're gonna go look at those real quick. So the missile launcher that you get right out the gate is actually very solid, really good. I love it, actually. I love it a lot. I would recommend continue using it for a good amount of time. If you just gotta put something else on there, though, I would do these, mostly for one purpose. So one thing that you guys are gonna look at and be like, yo, Dak, what the heck, dude? That effective range. You went from 2,500 to 500. I want you guys to understand something. 2,500 is a very far way away. Unless you're sniping with missiles. Actually, to truth be told, your FCS won't even lock on that far back. So just don't look at that, okay? Don't look at that. Your effective range of 500 is totally fine, because you're never going to get to 2,500 unless your FCS is really a long range FCS, and that's not the FCS on here, so that don't matter. So if you just look away from the effective range, everything is pretty decent. You do only get 2 lock-ons, though. You only get 2 lock-ons, so that can be kind of a bit of a bummer in certain cases. But you have less ammo in the back, so it actually doesn't have as much like capacity. The guidance isn't as good, but it does hit harder, and it is more lightweight. So it's, again, the whole give and take kind of thing. I prefer the standard one because 4 rockets is better than 2 rockets. So, excuse me, as far as lock-on goes, I'd prefer that. But other than that, yeah, if I was really dying for weight, I would swap with this. But remember, I actually don't remember nothing. Pretty good part, I just chose this one because even though it doesn't have as much attack, I get to lock on more. I usually use the missiles for peppering an opponent to max out that stagger, or just get rid of small groundlings or whatever. And the more lock on, the better for me in that regard. Now, the other back weapon, your left back weapon, is actually a machine gun. So one thing to note, if you guys are far enough in the game, you can go to the arena. In the arena, you defeat opponents in there and you get things known as chips. So I don't know why they decided to do this, but there's a lot of things that was just basic in the other Armored Core games that aren't basic in this game. You have to do more for that. Like the boost kick and the ability to put weapons in your bay is all tied into that. So try to do some of those. Very easy, dude. Very easy. No worries. Very easy. And then you can actually, instead of having like missiles and like laser cannons for your back weapons, which are still really good, in this case, we can just put more weapons back here, which benefits us because everything else is too heavy and uses way too much EN. So we're just gonna go for a standard machine gun. And the reason for the machine gun is it's on the others, on your other hand. So you have the rifle that we talked about. This is very tried and true. Then you have the machine gun. So let's say you don't need to use your blade just yet, or you're trying to close the gap to someone. You can use the machine gun and the rifle, pepper them down, shoot a bunch of bullets, get all nice. Once you close the gap, you can swap by pressing a singular button, the same button you would use to activate your missiles or whatever. Swap to your blade and then swing on them. It's much faster than it was back in the other games, because now it's just like so effortless. So I really decided to actually run that. And with that said, wait, almost forgot. Okay, so we have the booster, the FCS, and the generator. Now, as far as FCS go, I went with this one because I kind of feel that this is going to be a very common FCS that I use until we see more FCSs in the game. But this one just has a lot of cool stuff for us. As far as the game's concerned, as it stands right now, we're doing a lot of mid to close range combat. Now, the other ones don't necessarily work that well for it, except this one. It has a lot, but it has a ton of other issues going with it we won't necessarily talk about, because I didn't want to buy this one just yet because I think it came out afterwards. But this FCS, the FCS G2P1 SLT, very solid. It gets the job done. It does a lot of stuff for you. Your FCS is also how good your missiles will lock on and whatnot. So they have certain FCSs that's based upon missile usage, based upon like close range, long range, so for sniping and things like that. That's all that's necessarily predicated on your FCS. But this one's a basic, all-around decent unit. It actually is pretty good. I love it quite a lot. So yeah. Now the generator. This is where we were saving all the weight. Because this generator is huge. Now, Ming Tang, there's a bunch of other Ming Tang parts that make a heavy AC. The only thing we're taking from it is its generator for, actually, I think just one purpose. Because if you compare it to, what was it? If you compare it to the other generators, like, let's use this one for example. The EN load is too low, or your output is too low, so you don't have any loads. If you look onto the far right, all that it happens because it just doesn't have enough capacity. If you look at the load, if you look onto the left here, it has a lower capacity. It has lower post-recovery EN supply, which means once you run out of EN and you go into the red and you're completely out, when you are given EN again, it gives you a set amount. So that's not good. So it's just, in my opinion, even though it's heavy, it's very solid. Compared to the others, especially this one where it's just like completely worse altogether. There is this one, and I haven't actually tested it too much yet, so we may run this one, depending on if you're like really strapped for weight or don't necessarily want to worry about the weight too much. You do miss out on capacity and your recharge though, which are two big things. Well, most of the recharge is huge, so the higher the value, the more quickly generator commences recovery after EN consumption action. So let's say you boost, you do the assault boost. After you assault boost, the time it takes for your EN to come back. This is what this is. This was what was known back in the other games as ER, energy recharge. So it's quite low. I mean, like almost like by 30% or something like that. So didn't like that. And I know this one has the highest of it, but your capacity is like way low, so you're gonna run out of like EN to do literally anything. Like again, down here I don't have enough EN to even run. So yeah. So anyway guys, this is my build. I could probably like optimize it a bit more, but I think it's great. It's performed quite well for me. Hopefully you guys find this video relatively informative. I kind of went a little long-winded on this one because I'm trying to like make you guys understand, like, for those who are new, how the assembly system works. The next couple of videos won't be as super thorough because they don't necessarily need to be, but I will try to make it not as long, so that way you can just get the meat and potatoes and kind of go away from it. Like, if anything, I'll probably show you guys the full build, and then after I show you the full build, then we talk about why I chose these parts as opposed to talking about them as I select them. But nevertheless, thank you all so much for coming and watching. It's been your boy Dak908, aka the Dig Dug himself. I'm going to try and get a video out for you guys every single day this coming week. But if we don't, it's mostly because I'm trying to beat the game and I don't have a lot of time to play like I used to anymore. Because, you know, last Armored Core game was like 10 years ago and I was still a kid. I'm not a kid anymore. So, yeah. Anyway, thank you all so much for coming. I will see you all next time. Robo Fiends, take care.